A reminder that Tulane University promotes and protects the free exchange of ideas. Freedom of expression includes the ability to engage or not to engage in the exchange, examination, and discussion of ideas. It does not include the right to disrupt the freedom of others. Therefore, we prohibit the physical or virtual disruption, shouting down, blocking, or suppressing of a protest, a demonstration, program, or an invited speaker's right to speak. Please note that disruptions of this nature may result in the removal from the event.
Good afternoon and welcome to Tulane University. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our next session, Power and Energy Storage on the Edge, with Marshall Carver. He is a professor of practice at the Freeman School of Business and the Tulane Energy Institute. If time allows, at the end of the session, the panel will take questions submitted by the audience. So please look at all of the TV screens in the room. You'll see a QR code. You can scan that and type in your question, and I'll receive them at the back of the room. Please silence your cell phones, enjoy the conversation, and join me in giving a warm welcome to our moderator and our panel.
Thank you. I'm Marshall Carver. I'm a professor of practice here, and I've had a 25-year career in energy. For 20 years, I was an equity research analyst advising primarily hedge funds as to which energy stocks they should buy and sell. I had a 17-year career following oil and gas companies, and then I switched over to the energy transition and focused mostly on solar companies, with following battery companies, inverter companies, module manufacturers, installation companies, and I'm very glad to have Matt Escarra, professor of engineering here. He's at my far left. Cole Ashman, founder and CEO of Pila, which is a residential battery company. Jeff Cantin, founder and CEO of Solar Alternatives, a solar installation company based mostly in the Gulf Coast. They do residential and commercial scale solar, and they're doing quite a bit with batteries as well. So if I could have each of you describe to the audience about your company and your research and your position in the companies, and tell us about how what you're doing fits in with power and energy storage on the edge. Starting with you, Matt.
Sure, yeah, so my background is in electrical engineering, and when I was doing my postdoc at Caltech, I got into very, very high efficiency solar energy system design, approaching 50% efficiency, looking at really interesting new materials and devices and systems. And so when I came to Tulane, I built on that idea, and we've been developing for the last 10 years a solar energy technology. I'm a professor at Tulane that is focused on capturing sunlight and converting it with the highest efficiency possible into both electricity and process heat. So the heat can be used for steam generation, it can be used for heating for a building, it can be used for many different types of processes, whether it's food production, agriculture, chemical production, et cetera. And so we are at the point where we have a pilot plant on campus that we're developing on the roof of Flower Hall. And I'll just say one more thing. I'm also developing solar energy technologies for use in space, which is very much on the edge in terms of this conversation.
Thank you.
Awesome. Hey everyone, Cole Ashman here, founder and CEO of Pila Energy. I've spent my whole career in distributed energy resources at Tesla on the residential energy products team, working on the Powerwall, bringing that tech to market across the States, Europe, Australia, Japan. And then most recently, I led product at a company called Span, who are the innovators, created the first smart electrical panel, kind of turning that boring gray fuse box into something like a energy multiplexing device. All of this has been focused on getting incredible tech out into the world. You know, having the lab scale battery that reaches sort of peak efficiency is one thing, but in order to help the grid, which is what we're here to talk about today, we actually need these things deployed. Last year, I founded Pila with that mission to bring smart batteries kind of to the masses. We have created this modular plug-and-play battery system that forms an intelligent mesh communication network, kind of appliance by appliance. Think about it like a Sonos, but for energy storage. So Powerwall is the fixed speakers in the wall, kind of audio system installed by a professional and very expensive. We are the Sonos equivalent to that. Really excited to be on this panel today, talking about not only where we are today, but where we go. What this technology can do, not only at the business level, household level, but also as a kind of intelligent grid-wide system. So let's get right into it.
Thank you. Jeff Cantin, president and the founder of Solar Alternatives. As Marshall mentioned, we do residential and commercial solar and energy storage integrations. So a lot of the homes and businesses you see with a battery system on it, something that is a resilience hub, will have had a role in some of them. Not the only ones for certain. But our work is, my background's engineering, electrical engineering degree from Rice back in the 90s, and our work is really very engineering oriented, so we're all about problem solving. So a lot of what happens is people bring us their ideas or their problems, and we try to conceptualize those into something that can have a budget on it and that can be implemented in the real world. So that's turns out to be a unique skill set, because a lot of people have ideas, but it's hard to realize what it takes to get those built. So we take technologies that these guys develop and bring them out there and help them plug them into your homes and your businesses and make sure they work. So we do not only residential and commercial construction, but we service a lot of the existing solar and energy storage installations out there, which maintenance and keeping these things up and running and reliable is what, as a distributed energy resource, needs to be able to stand next to a grid. You can't provide an alternative to a grid that isn't as reliable as the grid itself, or it doesn't provide the same value. So we always strive to make sure whatever we engineer, whatever we build is to the same standard. I'm also a founder and president currently of the Gulf States Renewable Energy Industries Association, which is the trade association for solar and energy storage firms and wind firms in the Louisiana and Mississippi. Our executive director, Monica, is poking around here too, if you're curious about how to get involved in the industry. And also excited to see how the talk develops.
All right, thank you. This is sort of a question for all of you. I guess we'll start with Jeff and move to my left. But what do you see as the obstacles to clean energy and storage growth? If you look across the U.S., it's not widespread adoption. You have a few states that have more solar than others, but it's a smaller percentage of households. What do you see as the obstacles to that growing? And an even smaller percentage have batteries attached. So what do you see as the obstacles for growth in that? And when do you see that inflecting, so to speak?
Well, that's a good question. And I think right now, if you looked at even just Louisiana, we're probably 1 or 2% of homes have solar, and certainly half of that or less have energy storage on them right now. So it is a very small percentage. Many times that have a home generator or something. So as far as what people think of when they think backup power, batteries aren't at the top of the list. So just there's an education side to it that is very real. We probably spend 70% of what you might call a sales effort just doing education. So that's always a big part. And batteries are a different idea. They're not something where you flip a switch and everything runs as normal. It takes a little bit of, typically it takes a little bit of awareness and responsibility of energy use. As far as multiplying the work that is being done by groups like ours and others to bring this technology out, getting the cost down is important. Getting the technology and the expectation to match together. There is an expectation of how power will work based on having this, unlimited magical grid out there, which we get used to having until it's not there anymore, and then we have to figure out how to manage our own energy one way or another. So, helping people bridge that understanding of how to use what does it mean to use energy, how do they use their energy, how do they manage it, is for us the biggest obstacle, I think.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. Maybe first by talking about the technology readiness, and then more importantly, deployment. Like, look, batteries, solar, this tech works, it's ready, it's actually relatively low cost from a hardware perspective. And that has been true for years now. I mean, you just have to look to, our friends in Europe and abroad who are deploying this, and, even across the states in huge numbers. So this isn't a situation like, nuclear that's kind of constantly 10 to 30 years out. We're not waiting for some massive tech breakthrough. We've got good technology that can do the job. So then, why isn't it getting deployed? Well, it is, if we're focusing on the kind of residential commercial use case at the edge, right, for this panel, it's expensive and complicated for non-technology reasons, which adds a lot of soft cost. Today, if you were going to get a Powerwall for your home, entry ticket price for one Powerwall might be something like $20,000, $30,000, and about half of that is complexity built into how we deploy these things. We have 4,000 different jurisdictions in the US that all write their own electrical and building code. That makes it very difficult for manufacturers and companies to kind of standardize offerings, not to mention there's just a lot of custom work needed. We're working really hard with Pila to think about standardizing these product offerings, making it something that you can deploy yourself, but still delivers the value, the intelligence of these very premium systems like Powerwall. And speaking of value, we're talking backup power resilience. I mean, this is a silent backup system that you can run at night and don't have to worry about carbon monoxide. If it's paired with solar, it refuels itself for free. When is it sunniest? The day after the storm. You don't have to hunt around for gas or rely on a utility for your natural gas supply when the rest of the utilities collapsed. But the really exciting thing is it's not just sitting there 99% of the time collecting dust when the grid is on. These are systems that are smart, connected, and that means they can make you money and save you money for your home and business by trading energy, by shifting things around. And ultimately, that means putting you in the driver's seat. You are able to kind of see how you're using energy, make adjustments. And that value stack, I think, far surpasses what any sort of traditional fossil fuel backup generator can offer today. So I'll wrap that all in the kind of theme of education. I think folks largely haven't experienced what it's like to have these smart solar and battery systems, so kind of creating on-ramps, super important. But at the end of the day, we just need to deploy these, and with scale comes cost down, familiarity, and a stronger grid.
Yeah, I'll just add that, last year in the US, almost all of the new energy added to the grid was solar energy. So in reality, it's almost all new energy. But the problem is that's utility scale. To the point of this conversation, how can we take advantage of solar and storage on an individual basis and sort of democratize energy? And I think there's a lot of challenges that are not technology related, as our panelists have already mentioned. The technology's proven, it's cheap, and it's being deployed at massive scale. To get it into homes is a whole other set of problems that has nothing to do with the economics of the technology. But not everyone owns their home. Not everyone has a roof that is in good enough shape that you're willing to make an investment of solar on top of that. Not everyone has a place for a huge battery to sit in, or they don't have a garage. And even if they did, the grid does all the work for them. Why would they put in the effort to figure that out when they can just plug into the grid? And I think the future of this technology at the edge has to offer something more than just electricity. It has to offer value, like we mentioned, after the storm, and more. And hopefully we'll talk about that.
Well, speaking of that, so the topic of the panel is power and energy storage on the edge. Just thinking about on the edge, what technology or software or user experience are you looking at either now or just in the very early stages to improve cost or utility or resiliency of the product? What specifically can you talk to that you're working on that's A, ability to be deployed now, and B, maybe something in the future that we're just starting to think about?
I'm happy to start.
Yes.
Yeah, again, as I mentioned on the technology standpoint, there are some really cool, exciting new battery chemistries, solid state, sodium ion. I think these get a lot of press because it's feels very futuristic. But we've got great lithium ion batteries that work, are safe, and are low cost to deploy. So the thing that we get most excited about at Pila is the software side of things, right? how do you have this device kind of participate across your home to build a smarter picture of energy, put you in control, and then autonomously shift things around in the background and make these micro tweaks that can result in huge bill savings. That's the value of a smart connected battery. And then if you expand that beyond the individual household level, we can talk about community level benefits, supporting the grid there, reducing the amount of new investment in the distribution grid, which is incredibly expensive and gets passed on to all of us through our utility bills. And then you can extend that to the larger utility grid on the transmission side. Data centers, all of this, EVs, we're talking about this lack of capacity on the big grid. The reality is we have capacity, it's just not being used at the right time. Loads are very peaky. Having energy storage at the edge is a really, really valuable buffer to allow us to use the system we already have, so that it's not a question of we can't do this, we can't do that. It's a question of we can do all of that and more, and upgrade our buildings, make them take care of us a bit better, make them safer. All of that is a software and controls problem today, which is exciting because it means we can go fast, right? We can develop this at the pace of software.
I'll add to that, the idea of a virtual power plant tying systems together, something that New Orleans knows well with the docket out there right now to try to bring on a lot of distributed resources with batteries to work together as one single power plant. That not only provides a resource to the grid, but it adds to the value stack for somebody that wants to invest in a battery, and it brings the cost of that system down, right? So if one of the obstacles is cost, is perceived value, anything we can do to help bring that cost down is important. And Cole, knowing from the world of span panels and load management, that's really for us what we're experiencing is a really big shift in the last couple of years. We've actually been doing energy storage for 17 years. Our first installation 17 years ago was a solar battery system, in a residence, and the technology's just evolved since then. So recently, though, the ability to control both at a facility level the loads that are running in that facility to extend the use of the battery, it also helps lower the amount of energy storage that you need. So it actually, again, brings the cost of the system down for the same user experience, because if the loads that are not as critical in the facility can automatically be turned off and they're not wasting energy when you're running off of a solar battery, then you don't need as much battery, right? And it gets back to the end user taking some ownership of their use of energy. That can be automated through technologies like SPAN and other load management, smart panels.
And I just want to add the perspective of temperature here. So most of the energy we consume in our homes, especially in the summer here in New Orleans, is about temperature control, but also the refrigerator, the house. And those temperatures are knobs in the load management that could be part of the software. Maybe, I think Pila might be working on this, where we can shift energy use, so that we can survive longer during load events where the load's really high, or supply events, as we've seen many times with reliability. So, and maybe we can talk more about, even directly capturing thermal energy, which is something that we're working on. So, yeah.
Well, please talk more about that. So we've spent much of the time talking about batteries, but I know you're working on energy storage not via batteries. Talk about
Yeah.
it's an old technology, but also you're doing new breakthroughs on it. So what's the technological
So
piece?
the old technology is like a home hot water heater, and in many parts of the world, these are ubiquitous. It's a black sheet that sits on the roof, water flows through it, and you get hot water from the sun. It's not so common here. You see it a little bit in California, and other parts of the U.S., but that is basically free energy, right? It's cheap. And solar panels, best case, are about 20% efficient. Maybe 21%? I don't know, Jeff, what's the best that you're selling right now?
The best we've seen lately is 25.
You can sell a 25% panel?
Manufacturers claim to have a 25% efficient panel.
Yeah. So I've seen the claims, but I'm curious what people can buy. So the point is 75+% of the sunlight is being wasted in solar energy conversion. And so even though solar is cheap now, it's very low efficiency. If we can capture thermal energy as well as electricity, or instead of electricity, again, most of what our house is doing is heating. Most of the energy consumed in our house is either heating or cooling. And there are ways using interesting, thermodynamics and mechanical engineering to turn heat into cooling. And so the idea of directly capturing sunlight as thermal energy, ideally at a distributed level, could really up the game on total efficiency.
And in terms of the storage, how is that being done?
So storing hot water is easy. We all have a hot water heater in our home, so you can just add another one, add 2 more. It doesn't have to be anything super exciting.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that batteries are, $20,000 to $30,000 installed for a Powerwall. Battery costs have been coming down for ages, so it keeps going down, but it's still, the adoption rates are picking up, but it's still not widespread. At what point do you think it could get low enough that you would see widespread adoption of batteries where, more than, do you have a, when could it be more than 10% or something like that of houses that might have it across the U.S.?
Yes, so today we have, we have about 400,000 homes in the U.S. that have bought a smart battery system. These are from companies like Tesla, Enphase. Maybe some of you have or know folks who have these systems. Put that in context, that's like 0.25% to 0.5% of U.S. homes. They're all single family for the most part, owner occupied, and often paired with solar. When we built Powerwall in 2015, launched the first Powerwall 2, the Tesla customer was the kind of core customer. They own their house, they have a 2-car garage, they may be adopting electric vehicles and putting solar on their roof. The battery was very much a solar accessory. And that's still a great product if that's what you're looking for, this kind of really premium ecosystem. To get to mass adoption, though, I think we have to realize that not everyone is ready to make the jump from 0 to 10 in terms of upgrading their energy because it's expensive and because there's also a lot of time involved in working with really good contractors to get it done right. With Pila, the answer to that question is you have to lower the barrier to entry, both in terms of cost. So our starting point, MSRP, is $12.99. We want to bring that down even further, and it will come down, but that's kind of on par with the nice pull start generator. Not to mention, it plugs into a wall outlet. We already have standard electrical connectors in every home and building. You don't have to call a contractor to get a new refrigerator. We need to start thinking about these smart energy technologies in that way as well. And in doing so, you unlock renters, condos, and folks who otherwise may have been priced out or locked out of this market for other kind of structural reasons. But more importantly, you give people on-ramps. You give people the ability to experience the technology, understand it, buy the hybrid car before you buy the full EV, if you will. And I think once most folks experience this and they either go through that first outage or they see all of their energy usage kind of put in a very user-friendly dashboard in their hands where they can make automatic changes and see that reflected on the utility bill, that's fantastic. There's very few people who aren't excited by that once they kind of get the experience. But again, it's this quantum leap today from 0 to 10. And I think it's incumbent on manufacturers and folk building products to create the on-ramps.
And I'm going to echo a lot of what Cole just said. What we refer to that as consumption monitoring, knowing what your home is doing. Coming back to owning your energy, energy independence, we'll call it. It's hard for you to manage your use of the limited energy on a daily basis if you don't know where it's going. So that can come in a lot of forms. There's add-on gadgets for a home where, we might talk about tax credit changes in a little bit, but as the tax incentives change for something like a residence, we absolutely are aiming for, end of year, beginning of next year, having very low entry-level options for folks to be able to try out that awareness. It's not just, can I slap solar panels on my house? It's, can I start experiencing what it's like to save energy because of my own actions, right? Whether I'm turning the dials down on a few things I didn't realize were using so much power, or can I start up with a very few solar panels and grow from there? There's even technologies, some manufacturers are making solar systems that the inverter can provide power when the grid is out just in the daytime by providing an outlet or a subset of circuits in the home. And those will run as long as there's sunlight, but when the sun goes down, those go off. So it was a long requested feature that we got, well, what happens when the grid's out? Will the solar be able to work for me? And their answer was no for the longest time. And that technology's been out for a little while, but it's maturing, and it's to a degree where we can actually start you off with a few panels and run couple circuits in the daytime to plug in a small battery, to plug in a bigger battery, and be able to do more and more. So that lower entry level, where you don't have to commit to that $30,000 big battery plus the solar cost on top of that, that lower entry level is where we need to go to help people try out the tech and really get excited about it and grow.
And you mentioned this a little bit in terms of incentives. You sort of hinted towards it. But a question to you, I listened to the afternoon panels yesterday, and some of the oil and gas executives discussed that oil and gas growth in the U.S. was very robust under the Democrats, and even though their Democrats are generally considered not necessarily as pro-oil and gas, but it was still very robust growth, and we've seen some continued growth under Republicans. But in terms of the big, beautiful bill, how has that impacted your business outlook? And have tariffs impacted your business? Are what you're selling to customers more expensive because of that, or significantly more expensive, or has that not been as much at play?
I guess we're in a position between the position with the industry association and having a company doing the work. We've definitely been affected. I think it does give a roadmap for phase out of certain types of incentives that have been there. The residential credit's the most immediately affected because it has a sunset at the end of the year, but the difference is those projects have to be completed by the end of the year, whereas changes in the commercial really affect when they have to start. So anybody trying to do the solar credit really has like a month or two left to make a decision for this year. But what we're seeing is, in the changes in the credits, is Louisiana, for example, had a solar incentive years ago that was 50% of the system, which combined with 30% federal credit, 30% federal credit for 80% of the system paid for. When that 50% went away, that basically tripled and then some the cost of a solar system for somebody at the time. So that was a pretty significant change. There was a big shakeup in the industry, but those who were committed to doing the work made it through and understood that interest, that demand was still there, and the costs were still continuing to come down. And the change now is, it's important, but it's a much smaller percentage. It basically just increases the system cost by 30, 40, 50% instead of the full triple. So it's the relative change in incentives for something like residential. What we see is the demand is going to be there. There's going to be some cost reductions that happen naturally at the EPC, the contractor level. The costs are going to continue to moderate because the soft costs that we're talking about that don't relate to the hardware, companies are going to get creative. They're going to find ways to get their costs down. And I'll tell you one thing too, the price of electricity with the amount of data centers coming up and the other demands on the electric grid is going to continue to increase. And the number of outages we get from climate-induced storms and activities is going to put pressure on folks to take matters into their own hands. So the interest in the technology is not going away. If anything, the value of the technology is going to continue to rise while the costs are going to continue to be moderated. So we don't see a dramatic long-term change. I think there'll be a short-term blip that we have to deal with from a residential, but the commercial is going to continue the incentive for a few more years, and that awareness, that interest at the business and nonprofit level, which can use the incentives, is going to continue to grow.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. Look, no one who's serious about this industry and actually understands it is all that worried about this. It's annoying because the phase out was already going to happen over a 3 to 5 year period for these incentives. This just accelerated it, and that makes it difficult to run a business when you have that level of uncertainty. But in the United States, it's around $4 per watt to install solar. That number doesn't mean anything to you. Let's compare it to what it costs to install solar in Australia and Germany, $2 a watt. We have some challenges with how we have deployed residential solar in this country. And I'll give you all my hot takes after the session if you want to talk to me about it then. But the technology is ready. It's cheaper to deploy solar than most other new forms of generation in most places now. But it's a question about kind of adjusting how we sell and deploy this, when there aren't kind of additional federal monies on the table to support some of these other activities, marketing, sales, things like that. Net, I think it will be a good thing for the residential solar industry, albeit it will take time to adjust to kind of this new structure. On the question of like gas, solar, the rest, the reality is we need all of the above. We're in an unprecedented load growth scenario on the power grid, driven by AI, data centers, EV, and just electrification, since people are realizing that in most cases, the electric device is better than the gas device. If you've used an induction cooktop, oh my God, you can boil water in 30 seconds with precise control. So that shift is happening regardless, and we will deploy all kinds of tech. Maybe nuclear will be in that mix as well. But in our world, at the edge, it's generally safer, more cost-effective to deploy the solar battery system because you get additional value on top, to Jeff's point, which is the resiliency plus energy management, i.e. bill savings, plus the data. If you have a Whoop or an Oura Ring or an Apple Watch, imagine having that for your entire home. It's really incredible and addictive what you can do when you have all of the data to kind of control your home and the things in it in one place. These things stand alone without a 30% tax credit that was going to sunset in a few years anyway.
Do you think, so you talk about the US at $4 a watt and Australia at $2. Can we ever get there? I mean, I know we've been trending down, but it would still be a long, long while. What do you think? Can we possibly get there, or what's going to stop us?
I'm optimistic, but some things have to change. I mean, a lot of it comes down to regulation. The reason it's cheap in Australia is because as an installer, you can show up, do the entire job within certain bounds, sign off on it, and they can start producing power right away. In the States, you often have multiple visits by building departments. There's several truck rolls to kind of get things going, multiple levels of manual review at different, through different departments at various sort of local agencies. There's a lot of red tape, and I think system costs, while they've come down, our biggest challenge right now in the States is figuring out how to get comfortable with deploying solar as if it was another appliance. That's how other countries typically think about this, and the change is on its way. I think that's very clear, but it's kind of a speed of change question at this point. Will it be something we can get to in 2 years? Will it be 5 years? I think that's where folks in this industry need to keep working really hard and fighting the good fight.
To be fair, the economies of scale do matter quite a bit. At a commercial scale, even with buildings like this one, you do approach and get under $2 a watt. But the residential, a large part of it, and you might be between $250 and $350 a watt, depending if it's a really competitive environment. But the biggest challenge a lot of times, a company like ours, we spend an extraordinary amount of money on client acquisition, if you want to call it. Like marketing in America is expensive. And sometimes a year, if you want to put an ad out or put a Google ad out or something, you're competing against political ads, which we sometimes pay between $1,000 and $4,000 to acquire a customer, right? That's like customer acquisition cost, which is going basically straight into the customer because otherwise you don't have enough work to sustain your business. So it's that I think in other countries they have a more scalable way to grow the industry and to grow awareness of solar and energy storage. But I do think the ability to deploy these new technologies like virtual power plants, the software side, can drive down your cost because it does provide an extra value for the technology.
And on that front, you talk about the customer acquisition cost is high. Who's your main competition? Is it Entergy, the utility? Is it Generac, that can provide generators, or other companies like that? Is it other installation companies? And do you, so I guess that's sort of for Jeff and for Cole, do you think of, is Tesla your main competition, or is it the other, there's a wide variety of battery manufacturers. Well, I guess Let's go with Jeff first, and then Cole, you can answer it. Who's your competition?
Yeah, I mean, there are some competitors. There's always a few competitors in every market. You know, we're in 9 states currently, between Texas and South Carolina and Tennessee. Most of our work is still Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. Besides the competitors there, the utilities are definitely a competitor in the sense that a lot of the cost is still fighting the utilities to get connected, and the manpower you need to just get through the permitting, the utility permitting interconnection process as well as the local process. But you know, we often find, even if we have other competitors out there, the way we present our product, we are still our own competitor, right? Which means if we can't make a case for the technology and educate and raise the value of the perceived value of this technology to the level that the customer feels is worth them, you know, cutting a check or signing a loan or doing a lease or whatever it is, then we didn't do our job well, right? If we didn't teach and educate and provide that sense of value, then we lost. You know, we beat ourselves in that sense. So I still feel like we're our own worst enemy. You know, as a business, we have to do better at educating, better at helping translate that new technology into an investment by the end user.
Do most of your customers end up deciding between you and your product and a generator, or is it just your product and nothing at all?
It's usually our product and nothing.
Okay.
There is a generator element to it, and you know those customers because they've got a very low price point in mind, and their perception of value is a little bit distorted by the traditional idea of a generator. When solar and battery is really not comparable to a generator. A generator is just, as we were talking before the session earlier, we're really just translating from dependence on one grid to dependence on another grid, which is we've seen in Homa and other areas. That grid collapses as well when you put enough generators.
The natural gas grid collapses.
Natural gas
Yeah,
grid,
yeah.
thank you. So the generators are in a way a competition, but it's really, again, it falls on us to educate properly to help build up the value there. But you run into that, and people have to have that sense of, am I getting that value from the extra cost of a solar battery? And we've done a good job of bringing that cost to something that's comparable.
Yeah, on the Pila side, so again, our kind of flagship product is this small, modular, slim battery that goes wherever power is most important in your home, maybe on top of the fridge, kind of window air conditioning unit, sump pump, room by room, appliance by appliance, right? So we can talk about the product landscape. You've got Tesla and other whole home batteries, goes in the garage, expensive, super, super smart kind of product. Then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got the pull start natural gas generators. We sell like 2 to 3 million of those to households alone every year in the US, which I find to be kind of astounding. But hey, it's accessible, and it kind of gets the job done at a low cost. Increasingly, you're seeing the battery version of that generator. I bet folks in the room may even own some of these. They're like your Jackeries, or these. They look like an ice chest. It's a big battery block. You can plug something into it, click a button, run an extension cord. From a user experience standpoint, that's still very manual. You still have to keep it fueled by charging it up before the outage manually, and it's not doing anything in terms of your home's energy shifting or energy intelligence throughout the year. So it's a step in the right direction. Hey, you can actually use that indoors if you're a renter. It's lower cost, but it's missing out on this whole other important category of energy management. There's a missing data layer, and from the kind of long-term view that we have, these Pila batteries are essentially distributed infrastructure. We're having conversations with a number of utilities who want to give these away to their customers because they can, via customer opt-in, of course, can actually orchestrate these batteries at scale. Hey, that's a great way to lower cost by kind of sharing all of the benefits across different customers, if you will, household or business and utility. So we kind of see Pila as a brand new product category. It's as smart as a Powerwall, but it's as accessible as these kind of low-cost extension cord plus thing on wheels.
All right, well, thank you. And a question for you, Matt. So you have a pilot project going on Tulane's campus. And what's sort of the success case and timelines associated with it? If this goes well, when will you know, and what would be the steps be to more widespread deployment of it?
Yeah, so again, this is a solar energy system that captures electricity and heat, and the heat can be up to 250 degrees Celsius. So there's a huge number of possible markets that we could pursue with this. And right now, we're just at the point of proving the technology out in terms of we're integrating to a single building, taking a lot of data, seeing what breaks, we're iterating the technology. So we're very much in the technology development phase. But you know, the goal of our approach is to be modular. So there are solar thermal systems at very large scale. In fact, some of them have storage associated with them. In Arizona, there's massive salt tanks that are heated up by solar thermal energy to provide solar storage, and then spin steam turbines when the sun goes down. But we want to bring that to the small scale, modular systems, maybe not on a house because it is a solar concentrator, but for like a district, or like a manufacturer, behind the meter solution to generate both electricity and heat. Yeah.
All right,
I would say we used, as a company, used to do a lot of solar thermal early on in our business. That was the classic water heater, collectors on the roof that would collect the heat. It was independent from the PV system, and I think the challenge long-term with that technology was always it was a separate system.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think having a combined system, it's a much easier conversation with like the commercial, the large factories that we talk to be able to build that heat. It's almost like a free service, you know, like you build it in with an
They need electricity already, or they need heat already, and we
cost.
can do both.
Already. I mean,
Yeah.
and the electricity almost becomes like a side benefit to
But
generating the
we
heat.
see the competition for our work as a natural gas boiler. So right now, most of these people get their heat from just boiling water. So
I think we've got about 9 minutes left. I know there's a QR code that people can scan and to ask questions from the audience.
Yes, we
I could
have
keep
some.
going, but yes, if there's any questions from the audience, let's take them now, please.
Yes, we do. How do Louisiana and the Gulf South fit into the national and global story of distributed storage?
there's some amazing stuff happening in this region, you know, post-Hurricane Ida. Maybe, Jeff, you can comment on what you've been doing.
Just so I heard the question right, how does the Gulf Coast fit into the future of solar and energy storage?
Storage. What's going on the Gulf Coast with storage that's maybe unique?
Yeah, well, I'll give the Community Lighthouse Program a shout out. I think we were talking about Hurricane Ida a little bit before the meeting as well, and Hurricane Ida was kind of a turning point in a lot of ways, that it became a demonstration model for how a lot of solar and battery systems, early ones that had been installed kind of in 2019, 2020, got put into use for many months in some cases after Hurricane Ida. And it really proved them out. It showed where there's some weaknesses were, but it showed where the strengths were. And you had some projects, some facilities running for weeks, if not months, off of solar and battery alone, right? And you know, you very quickly figured out who was willing to manage their energy and who wasn't. But the folks that had an understanding of their system came out of that really with a whole new understanding of it. There were a couple commercial projects that got observed by some very insightful individuals that we worked with to conceptualize how that could be deployed on a larger scale. And that was what turned into the Community Lighthouse Program by Together Louisiana, Together New Orleans. And I see a couple folks in the audience from the program. But that resilience hub model of taking a facility, carving out a piece of it that can be kept running indefinitely after major disasters to provide services to an area, that's a really important model. I mean, even I think what they've done with that program, just taking that little technology and turning it into something much bigger service for the community, has been started to be replicated in other areas. So we're very proud to have seen that program pick up and run. But that is very important. And even the BBB or the IRA, you know, that preceded the BBB, had some funding for others, multi-site facilities for microgrids that really would even amplify that model further. I think some of those are still kicking, so we should see that continue, and that's really something we're excited to have seen happen.
Yeah, you know, energy storage on the Gulf Coast, I think we should talk about like the need and the value. You know, so I grew up here, I live in California now. 70% of home batteries in the US are in California. The need there is very different, and the value there is very different than the value on the Gulf Coast. In California, we have an abundance, a surplus of solar has led to what folks in industry call duck curve. There's too much production during the day to the case where sometimes you actually have to curtail that solar, and it's not well aligned with when everyone shows up at the end of the day and turns on their washing machine and starts cooking, and you've got to ramp up gas plants as the sun's going down. Batteries are a great tool to shift some of that daytime solar to that evening peak. We don't have the same sort of solar penetration yet here on the Gulf Coast, but I think we understand the need and the value of resilience more than most places in the U.S. for obvious reasons, which is why I'm glad that we've talked so much about that energy independence value proposition and that resilience proposition, which extends from the power outage, but also just kind of day-to-day managing power bills, and kind of suppressing that risk from the utility side as well. So when I think about what we can do with energy storage on the Gulf Coast, I immediately think about resilience, and I think about how do we scale it to more and more homes so that it's not sort of a luxury product for folks that can access the technology today. But we look at the world we want to see in 5 years or whatever, and every home is able to kind of protect its essential loads. Every home is conferred with a sense of that energy independence, load control, smart management of what's going on within their home and their business. And if done well, and if incentivized by the utility, and if this is kind of thought of as a collaboration, we can ultimately reduce rates for everyone. It's not just about the folks that can get it, but by operating the system more intelligently, we all benefit. That's kind of the beauty of the way the power grid works.
We have a few more. What steps are necessary to modify the power markets to provide the right price signals to incentivize residential load shifting and storage?
Time of use pricing.
Yes.
So we don't have that in Louisiana. They do have it in California, and that might be the #1 difference right there. So that's the idea that you're paying the cost to produce the energy when you're consuming it rather than some average throughout the whole day. So your electricity costs more in the middle of the day than it costs at night.
Yeah, commercial customers do have demand charges as well on top of energy charges. So on our residences, we're used to seeing a kilowatt-hour charge, but businesses also get hit with a demand charge. Batteries do have an influence on that. They can't completely wipe that out, but they can help moderate that. So in a way, we have like a little piece of that now, but the time of use is definitely, if California has the time of use, they also had a major regulatory change with NEM3 over there that gave them a big whack. Put a lot of that in place. So yeah, the net metering policy as well, in a way, discourages batteries. So outside of New Orleans, that policy doesn't exist. So everything outside of New Orleans already gets a benefit from being able to store its energy in the daytime and use it up at night as well.
Yeah, time of use is a big one. Obviously, if you can shift energy from cheap periods to more expensive periods, batteries are a great tool to do that. Also, VPP, virtual power plant, or just advanced demand response, which is a way to leverage that asset that you've invested in, the battery, and get paid for it. And again, this is all very opt-in, transparent. Get paid in peak moments, which are usually a few times throughout the year, to have that battery kick on kind of in the background. Generally, you don't even notice it, to kind of support the things in your home. It takes some pressure off of the utility network. And if we look to our neighbors in places like Texas, this can often pay back the cost of the system in a few years. So it's just, batteries are all about value stacking, right? So you might start with the resilience thing. Hey, I've got $600 of food in my fridge. I want to avoid that going bad in the outage. Then, there's some additional value on top to shift energy around, which can be from solar, going from free energy that you generate at home against grid energy, or, in the time of use case, expensive grid energy, cheap grid energy, and you can keep layering that on. VPP sits right on top. So I think, from a policy standpoint, it is incumbent on the kind of utilities and the public utility commissions to help set up these structures such that people can opt in and get paid, and it's all done in the right kind of fair, transparent manner. And you don't have to look very far for examples of that. There are more and more states that are turning on these programs. Massachusetts, in addition to California, Texas, and many, many more. So.
All right, and our last question. What form of energy, in terms of new technologies and/or energy storage technology, are you most excited or optimistic about for the future?
Well, I'm a materials engineer. I don't work on energy storage with electrons. I have colleagues at Tulane who do, and there's some really cool nanomaterials that are being studied that could dramatically improve the energy density of our batteries, making batteries much smaller, much lighter, much cheaper. So there's just all kinds of cool stuff going on with material science around better batteries.
System level. I mean, it's the unsexy answer, but it's kind of where we can make the most impact. Again, like sodium ion batteries, all the rest, very cool. But when you start to think about your home or your business as a big battery, which includes thermal loads and the electric loads, and timing how all of these things come on, when energy is used, things like pre-cooling the building ahead of it heating up in the morning from the sun. All of these things can have massive impacts on bill costs and utility strain. So I think, again, it's a software and it's a controls problem, which I think if there's anything that I get excited about, it's the speed at which we can start to make these changes, instrument existing buildings, and we're not waiting for all of our entire grid and our existing housing stock and built environment to turn over before we can take advantage of some of these cool controls.
Quick add to that, and I know we're out of time. We're going to look a little bit shorter term because we're going to see what we can get from our distributors on their shelves today, even though we're looking for new technology. Solid-state batteries are actually something that are rolling out now. It is a tech that has been talked about a lot, but even though it doesn't really lower your cost of the batteries, it helps make them, they'll last longer, they have more cycles, and it's less temperature sensitive, so it is a hypothetically more reliable product. And the longer you can use that, think of an air conditioner. If you got twice as much life out of an air conditioner, it's almost got twice as much value. So if we can get more use for the same cost out of the same equipment, that's actually that's a big improvement.
All right, well, thank you so much. I tell my kids all the time that I'm 50 years old and still learning, and I got a lot of value out of this session. I hope the audience did too. So thank you so much for coming here and participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this session. Our next session in this space will be tomorrow morning.
Okay.
The conversation will be Rethinking Energy Infrastructure through Energy as a Service at 8:30 a.m. Have a good evening.